This is the second part of the tutorial Paper Vision 3D content creation using the Softimage XSI mod tool. If you did not watch the first part yet, please do check it out first. You can go to my website, buldskits.com, you'll find a link to it. So let's get back to our modeling session. We've set up the front view in rotoscope mode with our guide image, and we've drawn lines around the letter contour and around one gear. We now want to do the circle inside the gear. To do the larger circle inside the gear, do primitive curve circle. Set the subdivision to 4. Place the circle using the translation and scaling tools, shortcut keys V and X respectively. By the way, use the spacebar to go in selection mode and rectangle select. So with the first circle selected, press Ctrl D to duplicate and create the second circle. Scale it down to make it fit the smaller circle using the scaling tool, shortcut key X. Minimize the front viewport by clicking in its top right corner. You can orbit in the user viewport by using the O shortcut key and the left mouse button. Change the user viewport display mode to texture via the display mode menu. The XSI mod tool logo is made of two objects. One of them is a single gear, and the other one will contain all the other letters. The single gear object will be used 3 times in Paper Vision 3D, once for each mod tool hose, but at different locations. We'll start by creating the single extruded 3D object for all the letters, excluding the gear. So select all the letters curve by holding Ctrl. Then do Polymesh Curves to Mesh. In the Extrude tab, set the length to 1. Do the same thing with the gear. Select the contour and the 2 inner circles. Polymesh Curves to Mesh. In the Extrude tab, set the length to 1. Change the bottom right viewport from Right to Explorer through the Viewport Mode menu. You now see all the objects that compose your scene in hierarchy. Select the Polymesh object, which corresponds to the M, D, T, and L letters. Press F2 and rename it to Letters. Select the Polymesh 1, the object that corresponds to the gear, and press F2 and rename it to Gear. We now have our two 3D objects. Let's apply materials and texture to them. To do that, open the Material Manager, View, Rendering Texturing, Material Manager. We'll assign a constant material to the object. This will give us a shading similar to the one performed by Paper Vision 3D. Do Create Constant. With the material selected, press F2 and change its name to XSI mod tool _ texture. As you remember, it has to be the same name as the one we've exported for ActionScript in Flash. Then, assign this material to both the letters and the gear object by selecting them both at the same time and pressing the Assign Material to Selected Objects or Cluster button. Now, in the Material Manager, double-click on the Constant shader to open its property page. Next to the color property, click on the connector icon and select Image. The Image property page will now appear. In the Image section, click on New, New from File, and browse to the XSI mod tool _ texture.jpg file. Now let's map the texture on our object. In the Texture Projection section, click on New, Planar XY. You can now close the property page and the Material Manager. The front and back face of the letter object should currently already be mapped properly. You can verify that by looking at the object in the user view. We'll now map the gear front and back face texture. Notice the rectangle around the object? Those are the respective object texture support. We need to get the gear texture support at the same size and location as the letters texture support, since this one has the proper proportion and location that fits the actual texture image size. To do that, we'll first align the gear texture support on the middle of the letters texture support. So we'll select the letters texture support first, hold Ctrl, and add the gear texture support to the selection. Then, in the right menu, transform Align Object. Set the Move option to all objects except the first. Turn on Along X and Along Y. Set the What to Align to middle of the first selected object and press OK. Select only the gear texture support and scale it using the scaling tool, shortcut key X, until it has the same size as the letters texture support. Note that you can individually use the X and Y manipulator to scale along those axes one at a time. The texture on the face of the gear should now be mapped properly. As you properly noticed, the texture is stretched on the contour of the object. We still need to map the contour of those objects properly. In the user viewport, select the letters object. In the select pane, top right, click on the polygon selection mode. Then press F10 to enable the raycast selection tool. Select the polygon part of the contour of a letter. With Alt pressed, middle click on an adjacent polygon, also part of the contour. The complete contour polygons should now be selected. You can hold Ctrl and select the missing polygon if it's not the case. Open the texture editor, View, Rendering, Texturing, Texture Editor. Open the cylindrical subprojection menu. Make sure that the Fit to Image option is turned on and do XZ Object Align. The contour UVs now appears as a rectangle. Place it over the bottom right white part of the image by translating and scaling it. Take the time to position your pivot wisely to ease the scaling process. Repeat these steps for the other letters and for the gear contour. Note that once in the texture editor, you can also fine-tune the mapping of the faces if it needs adjustment. We have our two objects. They share the same material, which has the proper name. We've set the texture mapping UVs properly on them. Well, we're done. Let's export those objects now. Select the letters object and do File, Crosswalk, Export. Set the crosswalk file type to Collada 1.4.1. In the Setting tabs, turn on the Export Selection Only option, turn on the Convert Geometry to Triangles, and turn off the Export XSI Extra option. Then set the file name to your Flash project folder and letters.dae and hit export. Before exporting the gear, we need to perform a last little modification to this object dot. Do Transform Move Center to Vertices. We also need to place this object at the center of the world, so in the Transform pane, type 0, 0, 0 as the X, Y, and Z value of the translation. With this done, it will be easy to animate the gear in Flash. You can now select the gear object and perform the same export step with the file name equals to your Flash project folder gear.dae. Voila! Go back to your XSI Mod Tool project in Flash CS3 and hit F12 to publish. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial as much as I enjoy doing it. Don't forget to check for Softimage crosswalk updates, and especially do go ahead and give a try to the Softimage XSI Mod Tool. It's free and I'm sure you'll like it. you'll see how it's a perfect fit for Papervision 3D content creation.